Western science is a dilemma because the arrogance of Western science and Western thought is that they always think they're right, not different. And so I think and believe that our people and the many nations of Indian people in this country have their own science prior to Columbus. How did we know the inside bark of a willow tree had the same chemical properties as aspirin? How were we able to know things about the stars and agriculture? The first solar-powered condos in America were Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. Brain surgery in Central and South America. The mathematics of the indigenous people of the Aztecs. Medicines, over 200 medicines in modern pharmacology are attributed to Indian people. So I think we knew a lot of people, and those things have not been respected or acknowledged. And I think it's important for our people at this point in history to understand both. That way we can make our own comparisons. We don't forget who we are, and we can move forward. I think there's some valuable things that were contributed by Western science, but also by native peoples in Africa, and also people from the East, the Chinese, the Oriental people, Asian people, that are valuable for all of us. So if we can put them all together and honor them and learn from each other, I think we can do more things. So it's important to know both so we can compare, contrast, but also really get into our stories about who we are and what our knowledge is about our own stories. So I think it's important that the building the awareness of our own tribal knowledges. Navajo knowledge is not necessarily Crow knowledge, but it doesn't mean either one of them are wrong. They're just from a different area. There might be some regional comparisons. The star knowledge of Indian people is incredible. Our roadmap of time, distance, mathematics, stories, cosmology emanate from the stars. And listening to traditional people talk about our own star knowledge without having one astronomy course on their transcript doesn't mean they don't know anything. In fact, we fill in the blanks for many of the researchers now. And sharing the stories with each other makes Indian people sit a little taller, makes us a little more knowledgeable, and knowing that we had knowledge that we are recovering at this point.
Science has derived out of the Western European worldview, which was initially a religious view. And what it has really done is just narrow the perspective. So no one's ever asked the question before, what do other societies see as the origin of the world, how it functions, what the relationship of forms of life and even human societies, what their relationship. So in the traditions of the tribe, many tribes go way back prior to any other identifiable societies on any other continent. So they have knowledge of things that have happened that these other people don't. So major contributions will be made by Indian people knowledgeable in their own traditions.
I don't think the goal of coexisting is the goal. They shouldn't coexist in some ways. And I think we ought to look at the difference as a gift and as a treasure, rather than trying to put something into a box that doesn't fit. And if it's useful to us, we ought to pick it up and go down the road with it. And so there's going to be conflict, but that's a process, and not an event. This is not a question of being right or wrong. It's for us to know both, because we're inundated with the computer society, we're inundated with the information highway. Things move different and fast. We still need to know how to start a car, do email, and answer a telephone. And so I think we incorporate the ways of science and how it's useful to us and the technology, but not forget who we are. I think the value statement around this might be is that when students emerge from the educational pipeline, that they land on their moccasins and not on their Gucci's. We're not trying to train brown people to be Western scientists. We got to know where we separate and are different. We got to know where we come together. But to know and appreciate and understand the differences. So coexistence does not mean integration or assimilation, not the least, just the opposite. But let's honor the differences and take what is useful for the better and the greater good of the community. So we need to go further, engage with those questions with each other. Engagement is the thing, and understanding doesn't always mean agreement. It simply means understanding. And so let's move forward. I think we need to do it on our own terms rather than have somebody tell us what it should or shouldn't be.
Well, first, science and math are badly taught as a rule. And a lot of it at the beginning is simply memorization. Now, I think that there's memorization in Indian learning techniques also, but it's a situation where you're experiencing something and then you remember it. And so an elder will say, always look at these bushes when the blossoms are a certain color. Of course, you have to memorize that and remember it. But you're out there with the elder and you've had a hands-on experience. The way science and math are taught today, you're put in this little room and then you're expected to memorize all these things. Nothing that you learn relates to the world you live in. So it's highly abstract, and I think it takes a while for people from outside that society to kind of adjust to that.
I think one of the most important things if students are going to pursue the disciplines of math and science is they take mathematics. If you can't take math, you can't do science, you can't do engineering, you can't do a decent school of business because you need calculus. That is the major roadblock to many of the students as they progress. One of the beauties of tribal colleges that they do true open admissions, and they teach from third grade arithmetic to calculus. And when students are ready to learn, they accelerate themselves very quickly. But the roadblock in Western science, of course, is the mathematics. And so it's not ability, it's attitude. And our people are smart enough to do it. In fact, our mathematical formulations were advanced. Navajo women who do rugs, they have not had one math course or logic course, and every one of those rugs come out perfect. They have a higher order of logic. Math is a course that teaches another language. It teaches logic. It's less culturally biased than some of the other disciplines that are more judgmental or more subjective. This is quantitative, so it teaches young people how to use their brains, how to think. And I think using the mathematics gives them academic confidence and without being hurtful. So I say that they can't get enough mathematics. It's a cousin to the science. I think Indian people were quantitative. How could they measure the seasons and the days? And they could count. And they knew applied mathematics, probably, rather than theoretical. But I think it's just good training for young people. And if they don't take the mathematics, the career doors are slammed in their face, but they're slammed silently. Because when you graduate from high school with a deficit in mathematics, in other courses as well, when you go to a college, you have to make up high school and college, which is discouraging, and people should not have to do that. And so you need to traditional knowledge, but as well as teaching mathematics. But I think we can use Indian story problems and counting things. There's ways to do this, and I think it's important that was the single most important advice. The other advice is that you're going to fail a test. So what? You know, if you're moving forward, you know that you're moving forward. If you fall on your face, at least you're moving forward. Don't let the academic institution push you backwards down the steps. And so the students who are successful are the ones that are not the brightest, but the most persistence. And the ones that have the unconditional belief that they're going to make it, two, that their dreams, their visions can come true. that they don't give up, because that's the last. If you think about losing, you're already lost. And the most important thing in our culture, Indian people across the country, is that when they need help, they should ask the Creator. And those who do that are ones who can have the greatest odds of being successful. And so, if you want to be a good student, you have to study. If you want to be a good writer, you have to write. If you want to play basketball, get outside and shoot baskets. If you want to write poetry, if you want to be a good mathematician, you got to do the work. There is no shortcut. You have to do the dream. So if we as educators want to have a harvest, you have to plant the seeds. And we plant the seeds early on, because you decide the foundation for becoming whoever or whatever you want to be is decided very early on. But the more academic training you have, the more choices you will have later. And those choices that you make later will be the right ones.
To recognize that for almost every tribe, the view of the world is that it's an organic view. What science tries to tell you is it's a mechanical view. And so if they understand they're leaving one context, moving into another, and this other context will be more restrictive. So I would advise them to always have confidence in their own tradition, that tradition handles harder problems, it relates more things, it has great capability in explaining things that mechanical science calls anomalies. And sometimes there are things that sound totally incredulous in the oral tradition, but in point of fact they are true. So I don't think Indians should move to science and say, well, this is certain knowledge and what we had was not, or was superstitious knowledge. Science is primarily interested in what things are made of. So they go into atoms and all of these things. And the Indian tribes, for the most part, are interested in how things behave, which implies mind and personality and a wholly organic, intelligent world. So if students would keep those things in mind, that there really is a difference there, then I think they could get on top of studying science and understand that all they're learning are tools and methodologies for viewing things in one perspective, a mechanical perspective. They can then leave that and turn back to their traditions, understand they're going to understand the world as how it behaves, living things behaving. So it takes, I think, an aware person to know that you're going back and forth. You can't just translate statements back and forth. But once you master that, it shouldn't be difficult, then I think Indian students will do very well in science.
There is a treaty, a wampum belt of the Iroquois Confederacy, which talks about the two wampums, which talks about the Red Road and the White Road. And those paths will never cross. I think the role of science, I think Indian people, by and large, are adaptable. And for the good things that we find on the trail from other cultures, we can use. I think there are two sides of the coin of science. And when it is abused, it becomes detrimental to the community and to people and to the society. I think there's a role in nuclear medicine to heal our people rather than to build bombs. There are things in modern medicine that come from the Western side of the table that have healed our people. But also we need to integrate into the fabric of how we use science with our own knowledge, and the wisdom and the knowledge of both parties can help better the community. My grandmother was a physician. She's a Mohawk woman who graduated from medical school in 1899. And one of the first things she did when she moved to the reservation was to talk with the traditional people and saying, If you cannot fix them and make them healthy, send them to me and I will try. And if I can't fix them, I will send them to you. Our work in this community is about community health, not who's right and who's wrong. This is how do we make our people healthier. I think there are a lot of resources in our communities, natural resources, from forestry to coal to oil. We need to train Indian people who have a traditional base of knowledge, who can understand the greater meaning of using the resources for the greater good, without losing context, their spiritual context of who they are. We cannot be dependent on non-Indian technical assistance, as nice as it might be, but they'll never have the ownership of the community and the people's future at stake. Because I think there's a legacy that our people have in knowing how we can use traditional knowledge and our own science, but also knowing how do we move forward together without exploiting or damaging, but sustaining and healing. We need to think of ways and use science rather to heal rather than to divide.
I think there are two levels of mystification. One is that a lot of the major theories of science simply aren't true. I mean, we still really don't have proof of evolution. We're still working with a theory of the origin of our solar system created by Immanuel Kant in the 1700s. Geology still doesn't know how to explain a lot of strata. So it's mystical in the sense you're asked to believe things that simply can't be verified. And it's kind of like the Christian religion. They teach you that God is really three persons, but it's really one God. And everybody says this is very mysterious. Well, it is if you don't see the logic in it. And the logic of it is that people are trying to believe something that is inconsistent with itself, the idea of persons and unity. So science takes on a mysticism that it doesn't deserve. And so you're always looking for that wise scientist who's going to explain things so you can understand it, but that wise scientist doesn't exist. The second level is that you have to learn increasingly complicated techniques in order to do laboratory science. And unless you stand on top of the research process and understand each step you're taking, it becomes very confusing. And so in research science, a lot of the doctrines you'll deal with are good science in the sense that they teach you how to do certain kinds of measurements and observations. If you're going to do those, that's the only way you can do them. They become mystical because they're very technical, very confusing, they have to be done in the right order, and you're taught that they're somehow related to this larger scientific doctrine, which you don't understand either. So I think if students look at the laboratory as a place to get hands-on experience in technique, you're not going to reach truth there, but you're going to learn a technique on how to generate evidence and how to demonstrate theory. And that's what we're going to need in a lot of reservations for clear water, restoration of soils and forests, treatment of animals. You're going to need the technical thing. And we should really break the two apart. We should say, here's science over here, which is, in my opinion, a bunch of white man superstition about the world. But over here is technology, and there's certain ways to apply all the machines we have. So you can master that without believing in the other thing.
I think AMP is another gift, which provides a table for collaboration and cooperation of tribal schools, Indian people, in terms of graduating people. At least that's the formal goal. But I think in the back of all of our minds is that the stakes are much higher. We're talking about the survival of Indian people and our children and their children's children. And I think it's important that we don't act as independent agents, that we act as community. And community, I mean in terms of a verb, not a noun. It's not a place. It's how we work together. It's not the issue, but how we handle the issue. We need to talk about sustainability, community issues, our survival, the common things that we center around. And we may do it differently, but the path leads us just to the same goal of self-determination of our people and economic freedom. I think our fight is the challenge, not with each other, that we figure how to work the differences with each other for the good of our people. And that's leadership is important to model. The tribal schools are critical in that development. AMP also provides a bridge for our students to go for greater training. Those places that we cannot train our own people as physicians or as engineers, we're moving in that direction. But there's a lot of people out there. We have to make our camps ready for these young, educated, and middle-aged people to return to our community, to make it safe to have conversations, to be with each other, to live like we're supposed to live rather than survive. And I think we can bond around those things. I think the wisdom of the collective is far greater than the individuals. We should look at differences as being a strength rather than a weakness, rather than as dependency and subordination, but empowerment, enlightenment, and self-determination.
Very little critical thinking in American society to begin with, so what you could say is it could be introduced in America with good profit. I was reading a book, a newsletter yesterday. It had 14 of the latest items on geological strata, and its relationship to the origin of man. And at the very bottom of this newsletter was a little note that said, there are 14 new reports dealing with this question. 11 of them come from Europe, and only 3 come from the United States. The 3 that come from the United States are the shallowest articles we're reprinting, and the 11 from Europe are a very good article. And so the editor concludes, does this mean we need critical thinking in the United States? And it certainly does.
I was I was an educational accident waiting for something to happen. And I've been very lucky. The reasons people are successful in this world is because they're able, motivated, and lucky. Our young people who are going to school, they certainly aren't able. They're motivated just by the fact they have intent of wanting to attend classes and do something for themselves and for their families and for their community. But also many of us have been lucky, and for some reason I've been lucky, and I've been lucky enough to have this job to help other people achieve their goals. And so the luck is Einstein said, the harder you work, the luckier you become. Luck is a place where opportunity meets preparation. And if we can prepare young people so they can recognize opportunity, because if they're not prepared, they'll never see it and they'll go right by them. And so math and science was something I tried to live with, to learn more about, and also to respect the knowledge, the wisdom, the immense growth of knowing the traditional knowledges. And so I remember somebody getting interested in traditional knowledge of the stars, and a young man wanted to learn the traditional ways of the stars, and fortunately he's from the Southwest, and he slept outside for 7 years. That's a commitment. And so the math and science is important. It's a tool, but not one that should rule us, one that we should direct and measure and use for our benefits.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I think we're talking about the survival of people and nurturing leadership. Science engineering is the goal. We've had a great deal of support. We've had mentors of many colors, and I think it's important to know that you take good help from wherever it comes, regardless of its color or its origin. Because intentions about care and caring are there. they can help us. And I think we should use all the people, the men, the women, the young people, the old people, the traditionals, the elders, the parents, and figure how to build community, because I think the common denominator for the survival of Indian people is education. But education as we see it. And sometimes we get confused because we use the wrong measuring implements. We use the mainstream measuring sticks to weigh our success. Now that's one benchmark to figure out where we are, but how do we use the other benchmarks? Let's figure out where those are so we can know what our successes are and know how we measure things and the well-being. Because I think it's important that we remember that we lead with spirit, not with head stuff, cognitive. We lead with spirit. It opens up the intellectual part of us. So recovering memory is just a really important and exciting part. Things are challenging now. They'll probably be challenging in the next 20 years, but things will be better. Indian people have its own momentum. We're moving forward. The hoop that Blackout talks about is starting to come together, and I think the hoop of many hoops will begin to sustain us as we move forward and know who we are and remember our songs, our stories, our language, our knowledge in the way we're supposed to know.